Hello, and welcome once again to yet another Website Depot podcast. As ever, I'm your host, Greg Benevent, and we're lucky to once again have with us Noel Dombroski. How you doing today, Noel?
I'm doing all right, Greg. How are you doing today?
Uh, exact same. Hanging in. There was an onion column once that like hanging in is the best anyone can do, and I am definitely have reached that level. Just get right to it. I mean, we were talking a minute ago, and I was just fascinated about how it's as we talk so much on here about ways inspiration you can draw from things maybe outside of your industry, outside of your work that you can bring into work. And what you said was fascinating, and I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
Well, I mean, it's a sad week, but I think there are bittersweet things that we can celebrate at the same time with the passing of Eddie Van Halen. On a personal note, I've been crying for like 2 days, and I love him so much. So I was like, I can't. It felt wrong to talk about literally anything else on the podcast this week, and I think that with any great idol or successful person in any industry, there's a lot you can learn. So today I kind of have a three bullet points of the Van Halen school of marketing.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, before we even get into this, do you listen to a lot of Van Halen, Greg, or are you not?
Me personally, it's the thing. They were like right before my time. And I ended up as a person that ended up listening to a lot of the artists that kind of followed in their wake and were directly inspired by them. I mean, I've seen Stone Temple Pilots 10 times. I have over 300 live recordings. I'm visible in live performances of the band. But Van Halen was one of those things that's always like, it was never something that I necessarily loved, but man, did I always respect it. As someone that knows nothing about music or how it's played, you watch Eddie, you're like, oh, this man's a musician. This is not an act. This is not a costume. Okay, David Lee Roth, that's an act. But this guy is the real thing. I mean, it's. I was always amazed by personally how this is. We're so far off the topic of this podcast. How Eddie and Dave, how that dynamic of this person that is clearly such a committed, gifted, genuinely blessed artist with this guy who seems like he won a contest in a raffle. And that just amazed me, like what that dynamic must have been.
Oh my
And
God.
in a way, it's even greater respect because you're like, this guy's such a great artist. He's carrying this guy, literally carrying him to the top of the 80s.
Yeah, no,
So that's a
absolutely.
long answer to your question. But yeah, so I mean, I've certainly heard all the hits and I know all the songs, but I'm not like myself. I would not consider myself like a great fan, but my respect for it is essentially limitless.
To jump off of that, I would love to talk about my favorite Van Halen story, and I don't know if you know this, but the story of their writer and how the rules about no brown M&Ms.
I've only heard this story a million times, but it's still worth telling. This is one of the great. It's like this. This is one of those tales of the '80s and '90s that will be passed down in generations. This is a great story, and I'd love to hear it because you're a real fan. I've heard it corroded down, watered down by people like me that only have heard it from someone else. You, as a genuine fan, I'd love to hear your definitive take of it.
There's a backstory to this that's I think is one of the number one things you can learn from Van Halen in terms of marketing. So for the sake of the argument, can you spit back a little, just a little of what you know, like the layperson knows about
Yeah, just that it was put in their rider that I believe they were to have. I forget if it was only brown M and M's. It was one color of M&M that they were specifically supposed to have, and it was buried deep within the rider. With the idea being, if they walked in and saw that the M&Ms were there, they knew everything else was there. If they did not see the M&Ms, then whoever had put them up for that evening or that show had not read it and had not gotten it correctly, and thus were to be condemned for it.
so there's some layers to that I think speak a lot to just the attention to detail. The biggest reason they included that in the rider was they were like the first, or at least the only in their time that they were touring, to have a show. They were bringing like 350 par lamps, and they're going into these places that are old, like the Garden, these places that were built in like the 50s and 60s or whatever. So they're bringing this stuff into these places. They don't know if they have the safe amount of power. A lot of these places don't have doors big enough to bring the lights in. A lot of these places, they're remodeled. And one of the most famous stories, actually, is when they trashed the green room. And the headline is, Van Halen causes $450,000 worth of damage. What happened was they caused $200 worth of damage. And because the company didn't read the rider, they had damaged the floor of the new gymnasium that they had built in that stadium by the stage sinking in because they didn't read the rider. But I love hearing David Lee Roth talk about it because he talks about the rider and he's like, look, you've got each of these like amps need to be, lined up this way, and you need to distribute this much amount of power here, and no brown M&Ms, and then like the next thing. So if you go in and you see that, that you immediately know that he said that's a line check right off the bat. You see that and you're going to go to your roadie. And so the stipulation was, if the M&M's rule was broken, you would forfeit the show and have to pay in full. And so that's what got everybody's attention, and everybody ruminates on, they're like, oh, Van Halen, they're rock stars, they just want to be picky. But they knew they had the biggest production going around right now. They were, and this is what it is. This comes down to, one of the top things you can learn from Van Halen is attention to detail, awareness, and safety. And I think there's a lot to be said. There's safety in every realm of every industry. And for them, the other thing too is an awareness of what was going on at the time. Because even now we have, people don't listen to riders, and you still see stuff, at least before COVID, stages falling down, this rigging breaks, somebody gets crushed. So, that's my number one, because that's also my favorite Van Halen story, is that in marketing, you got to have your rider. And I think that, whether it's in terms of, I'm making this piece and these are all the places it needs to be distributed to, and these are all the rules, like this is the playbook. But not only that, it's important to be checking in and be cognizant of the people that you're working with and make sure that you're all on the same page.
Right. That's how important that is now, working in this, difficult time where literally all the details have to be gotten correct, and disinfection and whatever else. That's such a good point, Noel.
Yeah, especially in the pandemic. I would hide little weird M&M stipulations everywhere just to make sure, because people will cut corners, So, and I think it's interesting because it's this measure too of, and I don't know quite how to relate this into a lesson, but it is also a lesson in reputation and how they're setting that precedent, and all they got to do, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, on the plus side is you get that headline about hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. Nobody's going to make that same mistake, but at the same time, you're gambling on how people are going to take it. But I think, to kind of jump off of that, I don't know, like thinking about reputation, I think Van Halen can also teach us a lot about how to get started and how to get people to pay attention to you.
Okay.
Like every other struggling band in LA, there was a time where Van Halen nobody knew who they were. The way they got booked, back in the day, you got to get into these big venues. You have to get yourself in front of the right people. And it's the same thing with branding. How do you get yourself in front of the right people? How do you sneak it in? And how do you get that spot, when you're just like every other hair metal band on the strip, no matter what your company is, you're always going to be up against.
Right.
And I think the number one thing is getting people's attention and but how do you get in that spot? So the way Van Halen would do it is they would do cover sets. Promoters, if you're not a big band that people know, the only way they're going to gamble on booking you is if you're going to play songs people will like, even if you suck, So they did that.
That makes sense, yeah.
And then what they would do, Eddie Van Halen and his style, but the jams and all that, they would sneak in their originals. But they wouldn't announce it. They wouldn't say, all right, coming up is, because they would never played that club again,
There's something we wrote on the bus, yeah.
So what they would do is they would take something classic, Smoke on the Water or whatever, but it's about...
Oh, that makes sense.
The segue is what does it, because the other thing, that's how you're gonna get people to pay attention, it's the flip side of it. If you do go up on stage, if you do send this email that's like, hi, my name is Eddie Van Halen and here is this song, that nobody solicited or really asked for, that's kind of a lot of marketing.
The marketing version of "We're here to rock."
Exactly, yeah. But if you're a heavy hitter, you can do that. So I think the way we can apply that,
right, until you get to that point, that makes so much sense.
So I think you can do it, and it works. From blogs to videos to emails, whatever. I think there's a sense of, depending on what your industry is, it's finding that cover song, finding that this pop culture topic that's, you're talking about this week, or, something else that's relevant, or telling a story. And I think actually a great example is this podcast in particular, thinking about it, because it's
Yes.
talking about digital marketing and Eddie Van Halen. And I think everybody right now, just, we all want to keep talking about Van Halen. We miss him. So you get that, and you get people roped in, and before they know it, you've got their attention. So just like the segues from the covers, I think it's important to find an experiment with what gets people's attention.
No, that makes so much sense. And even just to piggyback on that, based on what we were saying just a minute ago, I mean, just about, David Lee Roth, and I made the couple comments about him being a clown and all that in the 80s, but that was absolutely what the situation called for. By him being that kind of like fun-loving, sort of like goofy guy, is what helped beyond just the musicianship of the band to help to separate them even further from all those hair metal acts, and from keeping Eddie from becoming Yngwie Malmsteen or something. Like, it's just, that extra, here's this fun guy with this, like it's because you could very much listen to Van Halen at like, your backyard party in a way that you couldn't with like Megadeth or Cinderella or your Queensryche. I mean, that's not the best example, but you know what I mean? Like, there was that, by Dave being so fun and fun loving, that managed to bring in a whole different other kind of listener that, just great musicianship maybe doesn't necessarily do just on its own.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for David Lee Roth sticking to the bit, because I believe reading, I don't know if it was how close it was to their debut, but Rolling Stone in the 80s said something like David Lee Roth, he's the most obnoxious performer in human history, and that in his accomplishment, considering the depth and span of the competition, or something like that. And that was really early on.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if that's 1980, that is, wow. Like, it predates the Hot for Teacher video by quite some time. Yeah.
But it endeared people to him at the same time. I think if you got a product you're confident in, you don't.
And also it worked. I mean, not to just keep going up, but now I'm thinking about it. It works because the other guys in the band are not that. Like, in a real way, Eddie played straight man to all of that, where it's like, here's this goofy guy that might be able to draw you in, and then there's this, incredible musician that's going to keep you there. Like, it's that. I mean, I haven't thought about this in the longest time, but yeah, what a great, just brand, talk about a brand. I mean, that's perfect. That's multi-layered and yet easily accessible.
And you see that change when David Lee Roth regrettably leaves Van Halen and it becomes Van Hagar. Kat and I were actually just having this conversation that, and I think this does pertain to branding and marketing, that David Lee Roth is more like the Paul McCartney, like, let's sing a fun little song. And then Sammy Hagar is like, I had this dream about an alien, and it's a lot more esoteric. And I think that speaks to the kind of people are, this is controversial, but I think more likely to throw on a David Lee Roth Van Halen record if they're going to go party, and Sammy Hagar is like the training montage. So it goes to talk about the voice of your brand, because, either way, it's the van is named Van Halen,
Exactly, yeah.
So you've got this different mouthpiece, and I think it can go to what you're saying, like, how do you fight being esoteric? You have this guy who is very technically minded, and definitely want to be more experimental. And you think of that like brands too. If you say like something like, all right, I do car insurance, how can I make that fascinating? How can I take because what you're doing, your craft, is the crazy shredding that Eddie is doing. And as cool as that is, there's always going to be, there's some chick in the audience who's like, where's that tight pants David Lee Roth,
Yeah, the Golden Girls is on.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking at your brand, that's another way to think about it, is how are you, you have these inner workings, you have this technical aspect, and I think it's also just a testament to how you could have this fantastic talent, you can have this excellent system, this technical knowledge, but if you don't have that, and it depends on your brand. Maybe you need a Sammy Hagar who's more deep, but if your brand needs something to get people's attention, like David Lee Roth, love him or hate him, that's another lesson we can learn.
and it's funny just you mentioned in the context of Sammy Hagar, a man that, is himself so adroit at marketing. I mean, didn't he make more money with that weird tequila than he did with the band? Like, isn't it? I mean, here's a man who understands, the principles of marketing so well beneath all of that. Like, but yeah, that you can you can never know enough. That might be a kind of sub lecture here, sub point here.
It's just a good point though, because the first couple years I have read that they didn't really make a lot of money off of the actual records. It came from the merch, and it came from playing live shows. To stretch the wire of trying to connect it to marketing, it's much like if you put a video on YouTube, not all your views are going to come straight from YouTube. It's gonna, you got to distribute yourself. You have to distribute your merch, and kind of like we talked about the other week with you make something and then you pin it on Pinterest, etc. You have all these venues for revenue, and you can't rely on just that one. And I think that's something too that, like, even nowadays people just think like, all right, I just got to make the music and then I'll be set. And they knew, and Sammy Hagar knows that's not the case. So
right,
Cabo Wabo, that's it.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. You can make the music, and then you can make some tequila that's made in some weird offshore kind of thing, and then you're presumably not playing slave labor. But yes, but the idea of ancillary marketing streams is such a good point, though. I mean, and even just to speak of what you said, that's they weren't able to sell that merch until they were playing those bigger shows, until they'd come up a bit. But then they made that leap to doing that, whereas you don't have, your business doesn't have to wait until you're playing whatever your industry's equivalent of the forum is to do that. You can start that today. You can start that much, much sooner.
Exactly. Yeah, and the more you know your brand and the more you know your stuff, the more you can kind of elevate it. Yeah, I don't know. And that's like, it kind of makes me think too, my third thing, which is innovation with Van Halen. I think that's like the number one.
Certainly.
And I think that there's so much of that people can learn from for their own brands and for their own marketing. I think, an example is, I don't know, I feel like I have to pull up a video to properly explain this, but I wanted to talk about Eddie Van Halen's tapping. So I won't force you to sit through the whole 10 minutes because I'm not, we've only got so much time, but we'll throw a couple of seconds here for you and for everyone else to kind of see, if people aren't necessarily familiar with this. So Eddie Van Halen is super known for allegedly inventing tapping on the guitar. And this is something that's been around. It's not, he did, we'll circle back to it, but just to get a little jam on here, I just want to show you some of this. And then just watch his fingers and what he does when he gets up on the neck. So that. Anyway, I could watch forever, but I digress. So everybody looks at this, everybody's like, Eddie Van Halen invented, tapping, shredding, and like, that's cool, that's a nice thought. But if you look at this stuff, and Eddie Van Halen's like, yeah, well, I saw Jimmy Page doing something similar. What he's doing is he's tapping the bridge of the neck of the guitar with his fingers instead of picking it, and he's like tapping and like pulling it off. Almost. So he saw people like Jimmy Page do it. He saw people do it in blues. But the version that we know of it now, that all these shredders tend to do, Phil X, Ingwe, and all them, is this particular style. And rumor has it that when Van Halen was not signed, and I've seen some videos, I don't know if this is truly the case, but the rumor is that Van Halen, when he would tap during particularly this solo, he would turn away from the audience so that competitors wouldn't rip off his technique before they were signed. So between that and then I just want to toss in really quick this shot from the 1991 with a drill. And the amount of and Van Hagar, but there's a lot to unpack here. But to try to summarize it, there's like
Certainly.
it goes back to that awareness we kind of talked about. But I think it's also a testament to knowing what's come before you, knowing how you can improve on it, and then getting yourself to a place where you have enough knowledge where you can take those risks. Like, how do I use a drill on my guitar? Because that's not you can't just do that.
Right. That's not in the fifth lesson. We're not covering that.
That's next week, but no, but that's the thing. And so I think that's what's so incredible is this thing that he's so credited for is by no means something he came up with on a Wednesday, but something that you're taking what you know and you're improving upon it, and there's room for everyone to do that, and that's how you get the replica guitar is done after you, or whatever your brand is. Take what you're doing and what's come before me, and how can I spin it, and do that with the marketing as well. How have other people marketed this, and how can I spin it? How can I get wild with it? Because that's how you get people's attention,
Right. And it's, and really, I just, piggyback on that is just to have in your business, your industry, whatever it is, a sense of exploration, that willingness to try something new. I mean, does Eddie Van Halen become world famous rock star without doing that? Probably, but there's a reason that on this video today that you showed that specific clip. I mean, because he was willing to take the great gifts that he had and continue to push them forward in new, previously unrealized ways.
And I think there's something that repetition is so much of that. I feel like that's something too that I love to come back to constantly when we're talking about doing your own videos. But it's just like sitting down and trying to cut an iMovie, or something that I've noticed between the Grateful Dead and especially Eddie Van Halen is that these are people who they love what they're doing so much. They're not, at the end of the day, they're not sitting on their ass watching The Simpsons. And then Grateful Dead too. They'd be done with the show, and what do? They go home and they do scales. And Jerry Garcia, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, what he would do for fun. And you see people like Eddie Van Halen, you see him with that smiling, and his smile is famous because it's just like that's somebody who loves what they do, and they love it so much they do it constantly. And that's how you can, pack up enough of that data and enough of that knowledge to think, if I want to use a drill on my guitar now that I've done X, Y, and Z, here are the things I need to think about to do it.
Right.
Well, that's the biggest thing.
Yes, that.
Oh yeah, there is no real substitute for passion. I mean, but the only thing I'd say to that, to piggyback on it, is if you're listening to this at home or watching this podcast and you're thinking like, man, I'm not spending 23 hours a day in my hardware store, that's okay too. Like, you can do your business, you can love it and without and make it your livelihood without being like, okay, we're gonna sweep every 20 minutes. It's a sense of exploration and love and passion is great, but it's okay to go home at night too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you have to rest. But I'd say that find that whenever if you do find yourself getting bored, if you are far away from that innovation, you have to go explore those things. I can't imagine. I'm still stuck on the drill with the guitar. I'm going to be riding that one for a few days. But
it was amazing. It made me forget Arsenio's coat. And I didn't think that was going to happen.
I don't know about that. That was still right up here. But it's just like when you're doing the tapping on the guitar, you're building your calluses. Every day you do something for yourself. It's kind of like, doing a job, taking that conscious picture of, I'm going to compose this, take a good picture before I leave. You're building those calluses as you work, and so it doesn't have to be sweeping the hardware store. It can be, I have 20 minutes while I drink my coffee. I'm going to read about a better way to do what I'm doing with this thing. What's a better way I can market this, or what's the newest thing, like what we do. We SEO Journal is a great example. When we go to kind of see what's going on, to have those things you can go to. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's what leads to being able to build those connections to take the leap to do the thing nobody's thought of yet.
That is such a good point. That's good. That's really insightful, Noel.
I think that's the best I got.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're not going to top that. I was waiting for you to be like, "Thank you, good night," and then just like slide off the stage. That was,
Like tip your waitresses. That's about it. So
yeah, that was really great. That was the best one of these yet. I mean, it's a shame that it had to come from tragedy, but I think that maybe that's the kind of lasting thought is that there's something that can be taken from anything, that I could talk to you about this for several hours, but this thing's going on as it is. I could talk to you about this all day. But yeah, but this was just tremendous, Noel. Thank you for coming on. It's always good to have you, but this was really something today. And,
thanks for having me on,
all
Greg.
right. Well, on behalf of there we go. I'm on delay. My internet's bad, so now I'm talking over her. But anyway, on behalf of Website Depot, my name is Greg Benevent. Thank you. Take it easy and have a good night.
Let me do my elephant for you, okay? Ah, man. Okay, wait. Here's my horse, all right? Whoa, trigger. I thought you was Dale.